Hi, I'm Dustin with Pro AV School, and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to do something new. I'm having a section here called Code Review, where I'm going to have users submit some of their code, and I'll take a peek at it and kind of dissect it here live or pre-recorded, on the channel, and give some feedback, give some thoughts. Can help people that have submitted the code, but it's also good for people, the viewers like you, that are just watching. You can get some ideas and maybe see how other people are approaching problems. If you like what you see here, please like and subscribe so you can get notified of new stuff. So let's dive into it here. This was submitted by Scott, and he said this was my first attempt at room combine, and it worked, but he doesn't have a clue if he did it right or wrong. So we're just going to take a peek. I did look at this a little bit beforehand, but that was last week, so I don't really remember it. And I also don't have a user interface, so I'm just going to kind of pick it apart here with what I'm seeing. So let's take a look here. We've got the panels. They're the wireless panels, TST 902, 602, and a 602. And I'm going to this totally blind, other than the fact that I looked at the code. Like I said, I don't really know how it works, and I'm not going to try to run it or simulate it. I'm just going to take a look at the structure and kind of give you some thoughts. So we got TP01, TP02, TP03. So 3 panels. And it looks like there's 3 air medias. So it's probably 3 different rooms. Let's just take a look at the outputs here. Probably multi-purpose room 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So there's probably 3 rooms, essentially, that are dividable, combinable in some way, shape, or form. And we've got this X panel simulator. That is, let me see, X panel 2.0 simulator. Okay, so that was just for testing, basically. That's good. I was going to say if you're using one of the remotes, the TSR 302, there's actually a simulator for that. You can't use a regular X panel and point it at a TSR 302. I think that's for the 310 as well. It's kind of hard to simulate some of that stuff. So we got these 3 here, RFID 03, 0D, 1, and 17. I would have probably put these as 3, 4, and 5 or something, but that doesn't really matter. It's the only time you really use this is when you set it up initially. So what else do we got here? I don't really care too much about the devices that we're controlling, but it looks like we've got these outputs. They probably go to a projector or something like that. Scalar, scalar, scalar. Yeah, so it looks like each room has like a projector or something, and possibly one of them has 2 projectors. Doesn't look like serial control, but we'll just leave that. Let's look at the structure here. So it looks like I see cross points, so we're doing cross points. I like cross points myself. They're pretty flexible. They're one of the only ways to have a dynamic way of connecting and disconnecting things in SIMPL, so those are pretty cool. It looks like he's built handlers for each touch panel. When I do stuff like this, I'd like to have my logic in a folder, and this is just personal preference. It doesn't really matter. I'll have a logic folder called touch panel logic or UI logic, and then I'll have my touch panels underneath that. That lets me easily duplicate them. So for example, if I had, just make a sub panel, let's just call it UI logic. If you have all 3 of these in here, then it's easier to copy and paste them, for example. If you made updates to one here, you could comment this out, you could copy it, paste multiple, Control-Shift-V with 2 copies, and then go through and change TP01 to TP02 and TP03. Now note that if you're going to do stuff like that, you're going to need to structure your code in such a way that everything underneath it will be named differently. And this isn't how it was done, so I wouldn't expect it to work. But stuff like this is where naming conventions will be helpful. So if you have this called TP01, typically I would have all my signal names as TP01, not TP_01. or something like that, because that way you can do the search and replace multiples. But we'll just ignore that because that's just an idea that I came up with just looking at here. I almost need a timer on these to not spend like half an hour viewing these. I just want to make it quick and make it to the point and something that can help people. So we've got control cross-point routing for each of the panels. And this has an ID of probably 1, 2, and 3 was my guess. 1, 2, 3. Now, if you want to see where these connect, you actually have to run the program and run the command route simstat to see where they're connected to, or else you can compile it and you can get a text file, and that's a preference under compiler settings for generate cross-point routing file. That'll just point out in a text file all of the defined cross-point the cross-point symbols and the equipment cross-point symbols, the control cross-point, and equipment cross-point. So 1, 2, and 3. I usually use a higher order, like 1001, 1002, 1003. To be fair, I don't even really know why I do that. 1, 2, and 3 is fine. There's no problem with that. And it looks like we're basically sending some lighting presets, some shade control, and we're picking some sources. And we've got feedback on the selected source and no serials. So one thing, if you're sending analogs, which we're not doing here, you got to be careful of what you're sending, because if you're changing the connection of cross points, it will push the last, or it basically pushes the analog value through before you get a chance to look at it. So you might need to have a strategy to deal with that. And one of the ways is with Xsig, which I use to serialize data. And I'll just show you that one quick. Xsig command. You can put in just an analog value. It's not defined, so it shows as green. But if we had an initialize, do that and give it a number. So you have an analog, offset, and span. These can just be 0. The output of this is a serial. You can feed this into a cross point and pick it up on the equipment cross point with another Xsig, where you would run it to here and get the value out that way. And the advantage of doing this is that it will only pass the next change. So that's, if you're sending volumes and stuff through, it will be less problematic because you won't push the value from the last room to the new room that you connect to. I'm kind of jumping around. I'm going to have to get better at doing these, but we'll get better as we go. So overall, so far this is good. Passcode looks like password. The passwords are the same. So there might be some ways that you could optimize this so that you only have one password module. And off the top of my head, I don't know the best way to do that. I would probably build like a SIMPL Plus module just to compare a password and have it feed from the same source, maybe that pulls from a text file or something, and each interface pulls it from a text file or something like that. But none of this is wrong. It works. Just some ideas. Other thoughts: current page, interlock and toggle. I like to use analog initialize and equates for doing stuff like this. There's some advantages in that you can have multiple things sending it to the audio page and to the video page and stuff like that without having to do a bunch of ORs and stuff like that. So interlock works fine. I just prefer myself to do analog initialize and equate pairs, but that's fine. Let's just see what else we got here. So one of the things, when doing room combine, you want to synchronize. In a lot of cases, you want to synchronize the control interface so it's on the same page and everything. You want to synchronize the sources so that you can basically have a list of sources that are available maybe from each room. And then you want to have a way to send to all of the displays. And there's different requirements based on how the system is set up. Probably the simplest way to do it would be, say you have 3 rooms with 3 sources, and when they're all 3 combined together, let's say all the outputs, all the projectors operate together, and you just pick, but you, instead of just one source, you get all three of the sources because they're all available to be shown. So there's complicated and less complicated ways to kind of deal with that. But so far we got the cross point. So that's going to connect to this cross point thing. Now, one of the things that I noted that I wanted to make a mention of is this cross point connect. It is dealing with all of them individually. And that's okay, but if you get a condition where, and it looks like it's all initiated from a press on the panel itself too. You might want to have like a system function that on boot, it will set everything to its own room so that nobody has to press a button, because this will basically sit and wait. Nothing will get connected until you tell the panels what room to connect to. But having it this way, if somebody presses on all three panels at the same time, or two of them, it's going to catch somehow in this cross-point connect because they're all going through the same one. So usually what I will do is have an equipment cross-point connect for each section, like either for each room or for each panel. And you can do it both ways. You could either connect the panel to the room or connect the room to the panel. Essentially, it's the same thing. It's just a different way of thinking about it. So I would probably have multiples of this. Now looking at this is the way that I've done it in the past, where you have, rather than having it fully dynamic, you've just got specific ways that things can connect. So touch panel 1 can connect to room 1, to room 2, room 3. So that's picking the control ID and the equipment ID. Let's just see here. Yeah, so this button here, TPO1 to meeting room, multipurpose room 1, it's connecting 1 to 1. The next one is connecting 1 as a control ID to the equipment ID 2. So the equipment ID is the actual room, and 3 to 3. So these are all duplicated, and they just connect to a different thing. So rather than having 3 rooms, there's actually 8 different combinations essentially. So 1 to 4. I guess there's room 4 too. I'm not sure how that works, but basically the way that this program works is just connecting 1 to 1 and or connecting something to I guess a different spot. So there's different rooms that are combinations of rooms. This is a decent way to do it. I've done it in the past where I sort of separate things a bit. And just let me see if I can find a marker. So let's take a look. This is just thoughts on doing multiple rooms. So you have a touch panel here, TPO1, TPO2, and TPO3. Now you have a room. This is kind of the room logic. Room 1, room 2, room 3. What I've done in the past is have sort of a multi-layer thing where you have kind of room logic. So this is kind of like equipment logic. And I'm not saying this is the best way to do it. It's just kind of another way to look at it. And maybe I should zoom in a little bit here. Still kind of hard to read. I got to get better at how I'm going to position this. Maybe the board isn't the best way to do it, but RL1, RL2, RL3. So the room logic would control the page flips and the volume and stuff like that. So when they're all separated, you'd have them connected like this. But when 1 and 2 are combined, for example, you'd break those, you could run that to that and that there. If they're all together, you run them all 3 through the same room logic and run the outputs. It's a more complicated way of doing it, and I realized after I started explaining it that it might be a little bit far-fetched for just an overview. It probably takes a little bit more explanation, but I try to kind of separate things out a little bit differently. That being said, multi-purpose rooms and divide combine, they're super complicated. You can think of them really simple, but they can tend to get complicated pretty quickly. So overall, it seems like it should work. I would probably, like I said, connect these from the room or from the panel so you have multiple connections, just so they're not overlapping each other. There might be some considerations for audio, and I'm not really sure how the audio is done. Wireless. There might not be much for audio actually in this one. Tessera command processor. So it looks like there's actually 32, 31. There's actually two Tesseras. One for, I'm not sure how it's laid out. Video source. So overall, this is decently put together. It looks like it's laid out fairly well. I think to really go through it would take some time to actually pretty much load it and test it. I'd have to look at the actual touch panel files, and I don't have time to do that in this kind of a review. But overall, the structure is okay. You might want to look at, in the future, ways of kind of having that abstraction, like I mentioned, where you have something that's handling the page flips and stuff that you could connect multiple panels to, so that the interface states would kind of line up. Because the way that this is done here, and again, without really running it, but the way this is done here, current page, each of these has their own current page, and connecting them together, I don't think is going to update or synchronize them together. And that might not have even been a requirement of the project either. So I'm coming in blind. I think for these types of code review, I'd probably want to do future ones that are a little bit smaller, just because it's hard to really go through and get deep into things without sticking my foot in my mouth, which I admittedly kind of did with that over there. But anyways, I like doing this stuff. I like kind of working through things and giving people ideas, and I've done a lot of these programs myself. Some of them good, some of them bad. So I have some insights on what works and what doesn't work quite as well. I still don't have a perfect way of doing room combine. There's a lot of variances, like I say, in how they operate. And sometimes the DSPs themselves have a way to do room combine, and you can tie into that to kind of do a lot of the logic so that you're not running multiple volume controls and stuff like that. That's usually where I get tripped up, is doing things like volume. But this was a good thing to send. I think overall the structure looks pretty good. To give much more feedback, I'd need to look at the whole thing and run it and everything, and I don't really have hours to go through it. So that's pretty much all I can do on this. But anybody else that has code that you'd like me to take a peek at, maybe something that's done really well, or something that's some old one that you found that's kind of ridiculous and I should probably dig up some of my own, I'd like to kind of look through it, show you guys, maybe point out some of the things that are stupid, some of the things I did wrong, and some of the things that I have learned that would be better. So I'm going to put a link below this video where you can upload your code if you're interested. Now it's going to be public, so make sure to scrub off anything that you don't want shared, and that way I can just put it up here without worrying about it. And again, if you're liking what's going on this channel, please like and subscribe. And we're going to have more of this stuff. We're going to have more more tips and more tricks. And I'm always working on new courses, some of my paid courses, training.proavschool.com. And thanks for being part of the Pro AV School community. And make sure to join the Facebook group, the Pro AV School. And we do some conversations and stuff in there where I can get some of this information, some of these ideas kind of germinated and thought about and talked about before I kind of push them out to the bigger channel. So thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.